energy flow. We're going to talk about heterotrophs and autotrophs and heterotrophs, and then food chains, food webs, and energy pyramids. So an autotroph, we've talked about this, actually all of these things you've talked about probably in elementary school, 3rd and 4th grade, and then definitely again in 7th grade. So this is a recap. So autotrophs, also known as producers, you would think grass or trees or algae or plankton, or they're producers. They are turning sunlight into sugar. They produce their own food through photosynthesis. This is a review even from this year. They are turning, in terms that we've talked about recently, they're turning inorganic things into organic things, or in other words, abiotic into biotic. So they are turning things like sunlight and water and carbon dioxide into things like sugar. And then those sugars are eaten by other organisms. We'll talk about that here in a second. They're eaten by other organisms, which are eaten by other organisms, which are eaten by other organisms. So this organic stuff continues on until we get over here to decomposers. So let's go ahead and jump over to heterotrophs. So autotrophs make their own food from the sun. Typically, 99% of what we're going to talk about, or what you'll ever see, is going to be from the sun. There are some things that don't use the sun to make their energy, but you will likely never see those. Those are very rare. So heterotrophs. Heterotrophs, also known as consumers. Most heterotrophs are going to be consumers. And so they consume organic matter. They're taking the organic matter that the producers made, or stealing it from somebody else who stole it from the producers. So 4 different words here. We're talking about herbivores. They are the things that eat herbs. They eat plants. Carnivores are the things that eat meat. Carne is meat, means meat. Omnivores, which means they can eat both plants and meat, plants and animals. So essentially, they're eating both producers and other heterotrophs. Or you get down here to decomposers, which are turning the organic stuff that was made and put into the food web, into the ecosystem, or into the food web rather, and then they're turning that back into inorganic. So they will take things like, think about bacteria, or let's say with bacteria. Bacteria are decomposers. They will take things that are like meat or fruit, vegetables, and they will break it down until it turns into inorganic materials. And then that later on is used by plants to turn back into organic. It's a cycle. So heterotrophs turn organic material, they eat other organisms. Decomposers turn organic material into inorganic material. So autotrophs, heterotrophs, we've got consumers and decomposers over here. Over here we've got producers. So if we start putting those things together on what's eating what, very simply, and this is not realistic, and you won't see just an environment that has a single food chain because things are more complex. But if we say it very simply, a food chain is showing the energy flow from one organism to the next to the next. And these arrows, they show energy flow. So in this example, grass is being eaten by, or is giving its energy to the rabbit, and the rabbit is giving its energy to the fox. If you want to be more accurate, you'd say the rabbit is taking energy from the grass, and the fox is taking energy from the rabbit. I don't think the rabbit is willingly sacrificing itself to the fox, but grass is a producer. In this case, a rabbit is an herbivore, and in this case, a fox is a carnivore. If we always have a simple line like this in a food chain, then you're not going to be able to see an omnivore. That doesn't mean, so if we had a bear here, let's say instead of a fox we had a bear, this would still be a consumer based on this information that we have. If it said grass, rabbit, bear, then the bear would be a carnivore. Even though we know in real life that bears may get some energy from plants, and so it would actually be an omnivore. But with a food chain, we're going to show just one thing passing its energy on to the next in a single line. A food web is getting more realistic to what we see in nature, where there's a lot of complexity. There's a lot of kind of craziness and looks like chaos going on. So a bird, let's say a bird. A bird is not just worried about a lion eating it or a snake eating it. So a bird is not just going around thinking, okay, as long as I can stay away from lions, that's all I have to worry about. In reality, a bird can be eaten by dozens and dozens of things, 2 of which that are shown on this food web are a lion and a snake. And also, if we would want to draw another arrow, we could draw it over here to the fly, because a bird, when it dies, is going to be eaten and decomposed and started to, that process of breaking down through maggots. So in this one, we've got the sun, which is the source of all energy in the ecosystems we'll be talking about. The sun, its energy goes to the grass, and the grass and the tree pass it on to the next step, which we're going to call in a second. We'll see that they're called primary consumers because they're the first consumer. This caterpillar is the first consumer in this food web that we see. And then the next one would be the second consumer, or the secondary consumer. And so it goes on and on. But this realistically is not a very detailed food web. It gets way more complex because, like I said, each of these things may have dozens of things that they eat, or dozens of things that eat it, or eat them. So let's get down here to energy pyramids. Energy pyramids, the goal of the energy pyramid is to show how much energy, or we could also use this for mass, but show how much energy is being taken from one level to the next, or how much is going from one level to the next. And we call these different levels trophic levels. And so let's start off down here with 1,000,000 calories. If we have 1,000,000 calories, and these are kilocalories because the C is capital, if we have 1,000,000 calories in the producers, and that's, think about that, that's somewhat realistic. We have to have a lot of producers in an area to be able to support other organisms. So if you were to walk outside your house, you could very easily count all the producers. Well, I say easily. You could easily see that there are a lot of producers. There's different types of trees, there's different types of grass, there's different types of weeds, different types of bushes. If you go in the woods, there's different vines. There's a lot of variety, and they're everywhere. The producers are everywhere. So the example we had up here was a grass and grass and trees. Well, they use that energy from the sun to make a lot of energy, but most of that energy is not planned to go to the next level. Most of that energy is used for that organism to survive. So producers, they need to do stuff within their cells. They need to grow. There's processes that take energy. And so most of it's used up. 90% of it's used up. So only 10% is moved to the next level, where the next thing is going to eat it. So when a giraffe eats a part of a tree, only 10% is going up. So in that case, this would be the primary consumer, which is the first consumer. Giraffes, gazelles, and caterpillars. You can see giraffe, gazelle, and caterpillars. They're the first consumers in our food web. So they're the primary, the first consumer, and only about 10% is going up. So that's about 100,000 calories. It goes from 1,000,000 to 100,000 calories. And that's a lot, but it's a small percentage of the overall. So 90% is used up, and 10% moves up to the next level. And then the same thing happens. 10 moves up to the next level. We've got secondary, the second level of consumers. In this case, is going to be a lion and a bird. A lion and a bird. They're secondary consumers. If you start from the producer, primary, secondary. 1, 2. It's a secondary consumer. The lion of birds, 10%, and you see this pattern over and over and over. We get to tertiary consumer. The lion is also, it's not only just a secondary, it's a secondary consumer because you have a producer here. There's 1, 2. But if you go this way, from a caterpillar, this is the primary, this would be a secondary, and this would be a tertiary. That would be a tertiary consumer. So that's going to be 10%. And also the snake would be a tertiary consumer. 10% is going up. That's 1,000 calories. So we start out with 100,000 calories, and by 1, 2, 3 steps up to the third consumer, we've only got 1,000 left. And move up again to a quaternary consumer. In this case, the lion is the only quaternary consumer. So you have producers, primary consumer, secondary consumer, tertiary consumer. The lion is the quaternary consumer. And you think it looks kind of like quarter, like 4 quarters to $1. So there's only 100 calories left. So we started off with 1,000,000, ended up with 100. Every single step up, we're losing energy. And not losing energy because we have the law of conservation of energy, but we are losing energy that's usable in that system that's being passed on. So that's why when you walk outside, you can see a lot of producers in a very, very small area. If you were to walk outside, another role that organism that may fit this role is like an eagle or a hawk. You're not going to see a ton of those. You don't go into your backyard and you've got a group of hawks that live there and only stay in your yard. They need a large area because they need a lot of producers way down there at the bottom to make a good bit of primary consumers and secondary consumers and tertiary. And as it gets up, it can only support one quaternary consumer. So for a quaternary consumer to get 100 calories, the producers at the low level need to produce a million calories. That's a lot. So we see over here, biomass is the total quantity of organisms in an area. So if you were to count up all the producers, all the primary, secondary, tertiary, and quaternary consumers, all the quantity of all those organisms in the area is the biomass. Mass, think about like maybe kind of like how much something weighs or how much it's made of, and then bio meaning life, the amount of living things in that area. Energy and biomass decrease as you go up. Just like we talked about energy decreasing as you go up the pyramid, biomass also decreases. So there's less and less and less organisms. If you were to weigh all the producers in an area, the amount of quaternary consumers would be less, way, way, way less than all the producers that support it. And then down here at the bottom is repeating what I just said. Only 10% of the energy goes from trophic level to trophic level, and 90% of it is lost in heat.